This is the Decoding Obesity podcast, where we simplify, demystify, and decode obesity, helping you lose weight and feel great. So gear up for a fascinating journey through this ever-evolving field, and let's see what we find. And please remember that the thoughts and opinions on this podcast do not constitute medical advice. Don't forget to visit our website, www.decodingobesity.com, for show notes and more info. And now, here's your host of the Decoding Obesity podcast, Dr. Avishkar Sabharwal.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to another exciting episode of the Decoding Obesity podcast. If this is your first time tuning in, I encourage you to subscribe to the show wherever you're listening, so that you can get notified as soon as the new episodes are released. I have with me Dr. Melissa Choi. We're going to be talking about picky eaters, and we will touch on some of the tips you can use with your kids. I'm particularly excited about this because honestly, I feel practicing medicine is easier. It's actually way easier than getting your kids to eat healthy. Dr. Choi is board certified in family medicine and obesity medicine. She and her husband reside in Minnesota with their 3 young daughters. Having had first-hand experience with difficulty in getting her kids to eat healthy, she decided to dive deep into this, and this in turn led her to start The Mom Plate, and we will be talking about that as well. Welcome, Melissa.
Thank you for having me.
How are you doing?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm good. So let's talk about your kids.
Yes. I mean, I love them, so always ready to talk about my kids, right?
Yeah. So I know you had mentioned that one of your daughters was diagnosed as being overweight. How did that happen?
Yes. So, she was my oldest daughter, and I was pregnant with her during my second year of residency, which is a 3-year-long residency program for family medicine. And during residency, it's busy, and I wasn't taking care of myself. So I was eating terribly and stressed and not sleeping well. Ended up gaining over 50 pounds during my pregnancy. So for listeners, that is beyond the normal weight gain that is recommended for moms. And so she just ended up being a large baby. She wasn't large for gestational age, but she was a big baby just from the get-go. And so she was large, and as you may know, kids that are under age 2, we don't really track BMI percentiles. Right. But, once she passed that age 2 age, she was in that overweight range. And then it became age 3, age 4, and she just kind of continued from where she was. And she was a great eater, but, I think part of it was just my own lifestyle. At the time I was in residency, I didn't have time to plan meals, so we weren't eating well as a family. And honestly, because she was my daughter that was a good eater, we kind of just ate out of convenience. And if I needed to occupy her, oftentimes I would just throw her some puffs or throw her some sort of snack, because she would eat and be content. And so food was just sort of a way to keep her occupied. And I also didn't think about it much from a family health perspective.
So did you know right from the beginning that she was overweight, like, starting year 2 or 3, or was it something that her pediatrician mentioned to you at all, and asked you to keep a track of, or was it something that just was like a sudden thing that, wow, she's overweight?
I knew she was kind of a chubby baby, and, we kind of like chubby babies because they're cute and fun and cuddly. But, once she passed that age 2 range, I knew that we were starting to look at that. But I would say that we were blessed to have a great family doctor that was her primary care provider. And she never, shamed me or made me feel bad, but she did bring it up and just tell me, this is something that we should watch. She doesn't need to lose weight, but we should be watching this. So it was always kind of on the back of my mind. And around the time when she was age 3 or 4, that was also the time where I personally became interested in obesity medicine. And so it was kind of a parallel of what I was learning as I was studying for my boards. and watching our own family lifestyle say, oh, there's some sort of mismatch here. I'm not doing what I'm learning and teaching my patients. And there are some habits that our family needs to change.
Do you think her being overweight motivated you to actually take up obesity medicine?
I think it was part of it. I think overall I realized personally I did not have a healthy lifestyle. I mean, I think as doctors, we all know what's right and what's good to eat and is important to exercise, but do we all do the things that we preach? I would say probably not. If we did, there wouldn't be any overweight or obese physicians, but that's just simply not the case. And so I think looking at my own lifestyle, looking at my patients, and looking at my family really opened my eyes to just the vast problem that we have in this country, and that a lot of people need our help.
That's true. So, what kind of feelings did it evoke in you? You being a physician mom. I know you were stressed, but here you have your baby who's kind of in the overweight range. How did that make you feel as a mom? Did it make you feel at all like, you're failing at something? Or I was like, okay, I know what needs to be fixed and I'm going to go ahead and do that.
Yeah, I think, again, as a physician, as a mom, I'm very type A, and you kind of want to be in control of things. And when you become a parent, you realize there's a lot of things that we aren't in control of. Our kids are going to wake up and sleep when they want to, even though we want them to be on a program. And I think I still appreciate the way that my daughter's physician kind of looked at it. She recognized that this is a diagnosis or a problem, but it's not a character flaw of her or myself. And to this day, I still think of that, when I'm coming from the physician standpoint and helping my patients try to lose weight, to not bring on shame, but really be very open about the discussion when my patients are willing or wanting to discuss that.
Yeah, I think it's very important because you had another physician who was kind of advising all of this to you. And it's very reassuring when you have somebody else telling you this because, on the one side, you're a physician and you know that this is the way physiology works and this is what you need to do, blah, blah, blah. And then you have your parental side, or you're the mom, and then that guilt sets in, like, am I doing everything right? Is this what I should be doing?
Absolutely. And I think if I didn't have that, even though I knew logically that, we can work through this, having that reassurance, from a doctor as a mom to remind me, we don't need to panic. And I think that's the nice thing when we're helping families and parents with their children who may be overweight or obese, is that, this is a population that we really can help, because as children, they're supposed to gain weight and we're supposed to grow. So in some ways, it's easier to help overweight children versus, say, managing obesity in an adult.
That's true. Yeah. Yep. What do you think caused this in her? I mean, we touched upon it a little bit, you being in residency and it being very stressful and not necessarily having the right foods available to her. But was there anything else in terms of, we talk about kids being physically active, we talk about screen time.
Absolutely.
Do you think that played into this at all?
I think she was still at a younger age at that time where it wasn't so much on my mind. I will say she has a younger sister that's only 19 months younger than her. So we were very busy, when she was 3 and 4 years old. But I will say, now when my kids are a little bit older, I'm very aware of some of those things. I think about exercise often, for example, and we try to make it a family activity and we try to make it fun. And so it doesn't mean that we need to go for a 5-mile run. It's maybe we're going on a bike ride, or maybe we go play tennis. And I think that's the important thing for families to realize, is that there's so many options out there when you're trying to find activity for your children to do, that you should include them in those decisions and ask them, what would be fun for you? it might not be fun for them to go running, but it might be fun to play basketball or shoot hoops. And so finding something that your kids enjoy or that you enjoy, I think is an important aspect when you're kind of trying to work with families that have kids that are overweight.
Yeah, and we talk about exercise not being as important in weight loss per se in the adults, but something that's very different in managing pediatric patients with obesity is that active play, as we call it, is very critical in the younger population. And they have to have that physical activity because it's not only important for burning off calories, so to say. I hate to say this always, whenever we talk about exercise and talk about burning calories, because it's like...
It's not a scale, a 1-for-1 thing, right?
Yeah, but it's also, we talk about the bone strengthening exercises and the muscle strengthening exercises, which are it's a completely different concept. And I'll be honest, I didn't know about this till I, studied about this.
I think, I think also when we think of time in a child's schedule too, you talked about screen time briefly too.
Yeah.
And I think there's some sort of correlation with the more screen time that a child has, that they're more likely to be overweight and obese, because you have to think about, if they're spending more time on a screen, whether it's a computer or tablet or phone, it's less time that they are being active. And so when we think about the overall obesity rates in our country increasing over time, I think that's a big part, just because kids are spending more time on screens now than
I was going to ask you, how old are your kids now?
So my oldest one that I'm talking about, she's 9. And then my second daughter, who was the pickier eater, is 7.
Which we will talk about. I'm really interested in that.
And then I have a daughter that will be 4 in November.
Okay, good. So, they've kind of, you're the one who was suffering from overweight has kind of become older now. Now, looking back at it from a sort of having a telescopic view at it, what do you see is a problem these days that's causing this rampant rise in childhood obesity in this country?
I think we touched a little bit about that briefly. I think like adults, it's also a multifactorial thing. I think the lifestyle that we now have, kids are busier than ever. We pack lots of activities and play dates, and, things are constantly scheduled, and family life is very busy. And so families don't have time to eat together or prepare a meal. I think that our communities in general are changing. Some communities aren't safe, so children are unable to go outside and play. Some other communities don't have the funding to keep parks and field space open, so we are losing that. And I mean, right now we're in the middle of a COVID-19 pandemic. And so we aren't having kids go outside to play with other kids, and everyone's staying inside. And I think just our general culture of eating as a country has changed over the years. I mean, you look at the snack industry, I think it's something like close to $90 billion in 2019 just for...
And they advertise to the kids, right? And the kids come to the parents asking for it. I want to touch upon this. I don't know if you will be talking about this or not, but I wanted to know, how do we help people understand how to read these labels? Because on the front of it, they'll say healthy, quote unquote, but the labels kind of do not say that. I don't know if you'll be touching on that, especially for picky eaters, and, talking about what to avoid.
And so part of me is almost like, if these foods have labels, those are some of the foods that I just try to avoid.
Right.
And I think, and that was probably one of my things that I wasn't mindful of when I was a new mom, because I just looked for foods that were convenient, because I was busy as a resident mom, and I figured, probably like what you're thinking, these foods must be healthy.
Because it says healthy.
Exactly. And
then it says X number of grains, X many grams of grains, whole grains.
Right. I'm like, okay, those are healthy foods. And then as I was studying obesity medicine and just realizing, these foods are processed or ultra processed foods, they're going to go right through our bodies. Our body does not take any energy to, consume them. And at the same time, so oftentimes I will coach families to try to limit those packaged foods or those labels,
Right.
but go to your produce section to find
the one on the corners
snacks.
of the supermarkets.
Exactly. Go around the perimeter.
Correct.
Mm-hmm.
I just want to remind all of you to take a moment to write a review or a comment. Rate this episode on your podcast platform of choice so that we can know how well we're doing. So, Melissa, who did you turn to for help when you noticed or when you were told that your kid is suffering from being overweight?
I think with the help of our family doctor, she kind of gave us examples in terms of fruits and vegetables to turn to for snacks. And talking to other moms, but again, I think a lot of it also went with what I was learning as I was studying for obesity medicine. And again, just also remembering portion sizes. That was a big thing for us because I think my daughter, she could eat and eat. She didn't really know how to regulate or stop.
Sure.
And so oftentimes we would just hold if she was asking for seconds and kind of talk and see how she was doing. And oftentimes she was actually full. And oftentimes if she was still hungry, instead of more rice or pasta, for example,
Right.
the option would be, okay, you can have more carrots or you can have more broccoli if you really
So yeah, I want to
hungry.
ask you how with your busy schedule, what did you change so as to accommodate these whole foods? Because essentially they were whole
Yes.
foods, whatever you're talking about. How did you accommodate this into your busy schedule?
I think what we decided to do is when we were at home, if they needed a snack, for example, we weren't going to do anything that was packaged. And when you think about it, there are a lot of options that kids can still eat that don't come from a package. They can have plain yogurt, they can have a slice of cheese, they can have cut up vegetables or fruit as long as they're not choking hazards. And so we try to keep it simple and just say, okay, what are things that aren't from a package? And those things also don't take a lot of prep time. And I also really started looking at recipes that I could cook that did not take more than 30 minutes because I just didn't have time to do that. And that includes the prep time. Sometimes recipes will say 30 minutes, but it really takes you 60 minutes because you have to chop up everything.
Right.
So I really minimized the number of dishes needed in a recipe, the ingredients, but still trying to keep healthy and good variety when we were cooking.
And how do you manage the picky eater in your family?
Yes. So, the firstborn, the job of the secondborn is to always be the exact opposite of the firstborn. I don't know
true.
if that's your experience.
That is so true.
And so that was what happened. Our second daughter, who's also sweet and wonderful, but she was just a picky eater. She's petite, has always been petite. And, she loved every childhood snack you can think of, goldfish, applesauce, all that stuff she would eat. But when it was time for dinner, she would just sit there and she could hold out because it was food that she did not like. And so, when I counsel patients and parents, and even from my own experiences, what we did was we still gave her options. I didn't say you can only eat broccoli tonight or you can only eat this. But I think as the role for parents, it is to give them a bunch of healthy choices and they can make the decision to eat. And so oftentimes for dinner, we would have, 3 or 4 different things. And I said, you can eat any of these. Or if you really aren't hungry, you don't need to eat. And rarely, but sometimes she would actually not eat. But oftentimes she would be hungry enough. And when she knew that we weren't going to give her a pouch or some more goldfish, which I wanted to do initially because I was worried she wasn't going to eat, But once
Right.
we really said, she'll eat when she's hungry, I think kids are good regulators of that. She decided to eat. And another thing I think for parents is kids need to be exposed to a food several times. If a kid says, ew or yuck, I don't like that, it, just like adults, when we're trying something new, it might not feel familiar the first time, but when they continue to be exposed to it 8, 9 times, they may become better. And so, to this day, my second daughter, she is still picky and she would still probably prefer the packaged foods over the health choices, but she doesn't complain about it, and she eats it, and she's at least willing to try things. I think giving them exposure to different foods, or the same food multiple times, will continue to help with that.
Did she ever throw fits or tantrums when you wouldn't give her the packets or whatever?
She probably did, but I just blocked it out of my memory. I think she's pretty strong-willed. And so, again, I think sometimes for parents that do have picky eaters, it may be a little bit scary, because I did think, maybe she's not going to gain enough weight,
Right.
or she's not going to grow, because she was pretty petite. And I think, again, me as a parent, it was easy to think then, be like, oh, I just have to feed her the goldfish because I need to give her at least
Energy.
something to eat. But again, talking to her physician and thinking about it from a perspective of caring for somebody as a patient, remembering that kids are good regulators of their hunger, and when they are hungry, they will eat. And so as long as she realized at some point, oh, I'm not going to get the goldfish if I hold out, then she decided to try to eat.
How long would she hold out for?
Well, she could go a few days if she wanted.
Really?
I mean, she would still drink. It's not like she didn't eat for a few days, but
Okay. So if you're like sitting in on a meal, how long would she just wait? So I get scared if my kid, because I have a picky eater at hand. Okay.
Sure.
So if he doesn't want to eat, then we're like, how long is he going to hold out like this? And he just goes to the room, and he'll be in his room.
Yeah.
And we have to try and convince him to eat. Now we've kind of become, I don't want to use the word strict, but kind of particular about what he eats, but he can hold out. And initially we were like, oh my God, is he not going to eat for the whole night?
Yeah.
What's going to happen?
Well, I tell parents, when they come to see me and they're bringing in their kids as patients, is to kind of look at it over a week, not just one meal, whether your child is eating or not, because there's going to be that appetite fluctuation. And maybe it is because they're not hungry, but maybe it's because they don't think that they would like the food. And sometimes I would say, well, you don't need to eat this plate now, say for lunch, if my daughter didn't want it. But I said, when you wake up after nap time and you are hungry, this plate will be waiting for you to eat.
These are the only 3 options that will still be there.
There'll still be, yeah. And because I think she was thinking, oh, if I hold out enough, I'll get the goldfish when I wake up.
Yeah, I'll get the 4th option, but that 4th option is not coming.
And I said, no, these are the 3 things that's still on your plate. And that actually, it wasn't like instantaneous that she started eating everything. But over time, when she sort of realized like, oh, this is what I will be given to eat, she continued to open up. And I think she's made great strides. And if you met her now, you wouldn't even know that she was a picky eater.
How important do you think your patience was in all of this?
My own patience. Yeah, it was hard. You always, as a parent, want the best health for your child. And again, when we feel like we can't control that is what makes it difficult. Even with your own child, it's hard watching him just go up to his room and not eat. I understand that. And so I think working with your child's physician to see, are they growing appropriately, even though they're having these days where they skip a meal, and just being mindful of the overall habits of your child, not just based on one meal.
Yeah, that's very true. because at the end of the day, the metrics, your weight, the height, if they're going in the right direction, then you really don't need to worry that much about it. That means your kid is getting enough nutrition.
Exactly.
And that's
Exactly.
what the case was with my kid. He was growing appropriately, but we were like, oh, he's not eating. Oh my God, what are we
Mm-hmm.
supposed to do now?
Mm-hmm.
But and you had the advantage because you're family medicine. So you had the advantage because you've dealt with kids.
Yes, I
So me
did.
and my wife are internal medicine and we don't know anything about kids. We're like, ah. So that was tricky. So what do you teach moms who come to you with children who are overweight?
Yeah. The first thing that I like to bring up is to ask my patients and their parents, do I have permission to talk about your weight? Because I think we as physicians need to always meet our
Sure.
patients where they are. And sometimes, life is hard. Maybe it's a single mom and she's working 3 jobs and it's the grandma that's feeding the child. So she really doesn't have much say. So trying to understand the entire picture and not just looking at, each meals. But I like to always check in with parents and patients kind of about their current lifestyles, not just the quality of food, but even the quantity of food. I had one patient that said, oh, we eat very healthy. We don't eat packaged foods. And I said, oh, how much food do you eat? And they said, oh, he and his brother share an entire whole chicken for dinner.
Oh, wow.
As a 4-year-old, I was like, just realizing sometimes patients and parents don't have an understanding of what a serving is, not just for adults, but even for kids, which is even a smaller portion than what you would feed an adult. And also, picking up on the activity. And I think sleep also is an important factor.
Yeah, that's very important.
As well, too. And so if a child is kind of, again, being bounced around or going to bed really late and not getting enough sleep, that's going to also play a role.
No screen time. That's very important.
And yes, exactly. And I think in terms of guiding parents and kids, I always try to kind of go for the low hanging fruit. So asking the child, what vegetables do you like? And starting there. And in terms of activity, what do you like to play or what would be fun for you to do outside? And maybe we do have to start slow and aim for one meal a day that's healthy, because I think sometimes it can be overwhelming for families when they're feeling like they need to.
And I think you raised a very valid point there that you have to introduce the same thing a few times to the kid before they actually accept it. People should not, or, I certainly had this problem. I was like, well, I'm presenting him something new. He should be excited about it. But it takes a while for them to kind of understand that, oh, yeah, this is something new I may try. So it's kind of different from how we think about food or how I think about food, because something new is presented to me. I'm very excited about it. I'm like, I got to try this. But they're not like that. The first thing they'll say is ew. And I'm like, you haven't even tried this. How are you saying ew? You haven't even tried it.
Yes. And I was reading something recently too, especially with produce. When you eat a blueberry, for example, it can taste sweet one time. It can taste sour one time. It can be mushy. It can be firm. So even the same fruit, for example, can be different, but a cracker is always going to taste like a cracker. So that's familiar to the kid. And so, especially with produce, there can be different textures, different tastes. And so continuing to kind of expose your child to that food can be helpful.
I never thought of it that way. That's very insightful. I never thought of it that way, that, because produce changes. And I never thought of it. Each time you buy, sometimes it may be sour, sometimes it may be sweet. That's very true. I never thought of it, honestly. That's mind blowing.
Yeah, it's when you think of it from a kid's perspective, it looks the same, but when they're expecting one taste and it doesn't taste like that, I would probably kind of freak out or wonder what's going on.
Right. So how do you manage your kids' habits now?
Yeah, so I'm still busy, obviously, and so as a family, we try to meal plan at least dinners, and so that tends to be about 6 meals right there, because usually one night a week we'll give ourselves a night off and get takeout now. And doing a lot of, like I said, whole foods and meals that are easy to prepare. But then breakfast, I do like to give them a high protein, whole grain breakfast, because I know that will keep them full a lot longer than a bowl of cereal or a piece of toast or pancakes, kind of your typical American breakfast. And that has been helpful for them. And, lunch is usually leftovers, and I rarely will pack anything that's a packaged food, for their lunch. And then for snacks, I give them the option, because I don't want to have my kids never eat something from a box, because I think that also doesn't help a child, regulate their taste buds, or when they eventually get the opportunity to do that, sometimes I think children or even adults can kind of go overboard and eat a lot. And so I'll say, okay, if you want to eat these crackers, you need to eat it with a handful of carrots, just so they're balanced. And on a similar note, we will do occasional treats, but we often will split things. So if we go out to get ice cream, for example, they will split one serving of ice cream between the 3 of them. But it's interesting just to see their habits, back when kids were still going to birthday parties pre-COVID, a mom had told me that my daughter completely scraped off the frosting off her cake, because that was just something we had always done. And she told me later, Mommy, like, it's just so sweet. And so I think kids kind of can pick up habits too. So if you start those habits early and when they're young, it's much easier when they grow into them versus trying to change something when you're a teenager or even an adult.
Yeah, that's very important, starting early with habits and inculcating all of that early into their childhood. And I think my older one has started picking up on that.
Has he?
Yeah, I think so. I think he started picking up on what's unhealthy and what's healthy. Like, we've been kind of drilling it into him that no juices are not healthy. Like,
yes, that's a good point that I forgot to bring up. Yes.
Yeah. So he started picking that stuff up. So how can people reach out to you? I know you just started the Mom Plate. And do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yes. So, I love talking to patients and kids in a office room or in the office space, but I realized that I can't reach as many people. And so I've started the Mom Plate. It basically helps busy moms and their families, make simple but long-lasting lifestyle changes to help with weight loss and staying healthy, and also helping moms manage their time well, because I think a lot of times as moms, we feel like we don't have enough time. And so the easiest place to find me now, where I'm most active, is on Instagram, and it's at the Mom Plate. And you can also go to my website, themomplate.com, which will be launching soon. So feel free to take a look at that. And
but it already has a sign-up form, right?
Yes, you can sign up to get updates on my website. And if you do have questions, feel free to email me at info@themomplate.com.
And I'll be putting a link to your website onto my website as well, so that people can reach out to you from there. Listeners, if you have any questions about cooking for your picky eaters, please reach out to Dr. Choi. And if you've enjoyed what you've been hearing, please do leave us a review or a comment. Please rate it wherever you're listening to this episode. I am always interested in more inspiring stories about weight loss, so that I can motivate other people through this platform in their weight loss journey. If you have one to share, please reach out to me at host@decodingobesity.com. This would immensely help others who are struggling with weight loss and would be extremely valuable to all the other listeners. Please tell your family and friends about this podcast, and frankly, anyone who you think will benefit from it. I think that's all we have time for today. Thank you so much, Melissa, for joining us and talking about picky eaters.
Thank you. It was great chatting with you, Avishkar.
Yeah, thanks.
You've been listening to the Decoding Obesity podcast. Please remember, the information in this podcast should not be used in any legal capacity whatsoever. The thoughts and opinions expressed on this podcast are solely of the host and his guests and do not constitute medical advice. Views and opinions on this show do not necessarily represent the views and opinions of any organization. And that brings us to the end of the show. Thank you so much for listening in. Don't forget to visit our website, www.decodingobesity.com, for show notes and more info. And if you've enjoyed this episode, please feel free to rate, review, and subscribe on your preferred podcast listening platform. We really appreciate that effort. Until next time.